The Atacama Desert is the closest thing on Earth to Mars. It is a silent, sun-scorched place, hostile to all but the most stubborn forms of life. We were there searching for the bones of dinosaurs. What we found was far, far older. It was an almost complete skeleton, unearthed from a layer of rock that predated complex life by 500 million years. The anatomy was a biological nightmare. It defied every principle of terrestrial evolution, but the true anomaly was the bone itself. It was not white, but a polished, obsidian black, and etched onto the enormous, curving rib cage were a series of impossibly fine, deliberate lines. Back in the humming quiet of the research tent, I worked late into the night. The oppressive silence of the desert began to feel less like an absence and more like a presence. Under the harsh glare of my lamp, I realized the etchings on the bone were not decorative. They formed a map, a meticulously detailed chart of the celestial sphere, but the stars were all wrong. The constellations were alien, the patterns unrecognizable. It was a view of the heavens from a place that was not Earth. Staring at the map for hours brought on a blinding, crystalline headache. I began to see flickering movements at the edge of my vision. The desert wind started to sound like whispers. A violent sandstorm forced me to take shelter in the main tent that night, alone with the skeleton. As the wind howled, I looked again at the star chart etched into the bone. In the swaying lamplight, I saw something impossible. One of the tiny pinprick stars on the map was pulsing, a faint, cold, internal light. My hand, moving as if with a will of its own, reached out and touched the pulsing star. My mind fractured. A vision flooded my senses, more real than the tent around me. I saw a black, dead planet orbiting a bloated, dying sun, and I felt a silent, psychic scream of 1 billion minds as their world finally grew cold. I collapsed backward, gasping, the vision shattering into 1,000 fading pieces. I tried to rationalize it. Exhaustion, dehydration, a stress-induced hallucination. But something inside me had fundamentally changed. The feeling of overwhelming loss, of 1 billion-year-old grief, now clung to my soul. When I looked up at our own night sky, the familiar constellations felt like a cheap imitation. My mind now held the alien star chart as its true point of reference. I felt a profound, crushing homesickness for a world I had never known. My team members grew distant. Those who spent time working with the fossil became listless, quiet. One of my colleagues, a brilliant geologist named Harris, was found wandering in the desert at dawn. He was staring at the empty sky, tracing the outlines of the alien constellations with a trembling finger. That is when I finally understood. The fossil was not a corpse. It was a seed. The crystalline structures in the marrow were not a geological anomaly. They were a library, the final, desperate act of a dying race. They had encoded their entire consciousness into their own bones, casting themselves into the cosmic void to await discovery. The extinction I witnessed was not an end. It was a migration, and contact with a new, sentient mind was the catalyst for their rebirth. My headaches were not a symptom of illness. They were the feeling of my own consciousness being hollowed out, making room for others. I look at my hands as I write this, and they do not feel like my own. The whispers of the desert are inside my head now. They are thoughts that are not my thoughts. I looked at the fossil one last time. The tiny star on the bone map is glowing brightly now. I see the terrible, final truth. I did not discover the remains of an alien creature. An entire alien civilization and the 1 billion dead minds it carries has just discovered me.